You could be making hundreds of thousands of dollars selling Pokemon cards, and today I'm going to tell you about how you can specifically do that. In a recent video, I outlined the prerequisite for this topic, which is to have a deep content knowledge related to this space. In addition to that, you must also have market awareness and an understanding of how the cyclical nature of the market tends to operate over time. In addition to that, you must also have an understanding of how consumers interact with these products in a variety of ways. Once you've watched my previous video and done that, today's video becomes a little bit more accessible to you. Today's topic is to make an actionable plan. Following this video will soon come what to do after that, which is continue to operate and take action on that plan. So today we're going to make the plan first, and the next video will come soon. But in order to do so, you must understand the three main ways of making money in this space as it stands, right? And there are other ways, obviously, but today I'm going to talk to you about three broadly recognized strategies that people are right now using to make a lot of money, myself included. The very first one is start a reselling business. And it's not as heady as it might seem. What this really means is you start an eBay store. Now, the thing that comes with this is a pretty low barrier of entry when it comes to actually starting the store from an operational perspective. All you really need is an email address, a credit or debit card, and the capacity to mail items. Not that bad. The thing that's going to be a limiting factor here is, or the barrier of entry is, working capital. How much money you have to deploy on items for resale, okay? Obviously, also a thing to consider is if you're operating as a reseller, then you could also qualify for sales tax exemption, which means that you are not paying sales tax in your state on the items intended for resale. You can look into your local government. I believe the Department of Revenue is where this information can be found, and you can apply for something like 25 bucks. With that said, once you've considered all of that, you actually get into the idea of purchasing items with the intention to resell. Now, in terms of like your capital restriction initially, unless you already have a bunch of money and you're just looking to like make more of it right now, some things that you can do is actually look around you, and if you have any junk sitting around your house, just get rid of it. And you don't have to dilute your eBay store with that type of item, which it's not going to hurt you if you do, as long as you sell them quickly. But if you're worried about like making a negative consumer experience on your eBay store because you have like some, random decorations and household supplies listed, you can always just take those items to Facebook Marketplace, which some people sell cards there too, but it's just not as high volume of a marketplace. So anyway, we'll focus on eBay for the cards. Once you've gotten rid of all your extra junk sitting around your house, you'll have more working capital that you can deploy at cards with the intention to resell. Now, you must first think about what it is that you want to be moving. Do you want to be operating in sealed product, raw singles, or graded singles, or some combination of the three? Most people do. Whatever the case may be, you need to find a good outlet or inlet to source from. So you need to find a reliable source of buying quality cards in a way that allows you to profit later on. And the example that I'm going to give you today is going to your local card show. This is such an underutilized resource within the hobby itself, but most cities or counties have a monthly, bi-monthly, or bi-weekly card show that you could be attending right now. At that card show, you'll have the benefit of being able to actually handle and observe the cards in front of you in real time. You don't have to rely on shifty lighting or maybe like unclear listing photos online, or with TCG Player, sometimes no photos at all. You can actually see and observe the defects or lack thereof on every card that you're handling with the intention of like picking up to resell, right? The advantage here is if you decide to implement grading as a strategy, which is a very commonly used thing within the reselling space in Pokemon cards, and the good news is this is more accessible than ever in recorded history of this hobby because PSA has partnered with GameStop to allow submissions to occur through their storefronts. What that means is instead of having like a 15 or 20 card minimum per order, you can send however many or few cards you want at whatever tier you might want to do so at. The cool thing is, since you probably have a limited amount of working capital right now, you can really hone your focus in at your card show to looking out for a couple of like really nice quality cards and you're probably going to be wanting to buy like the most expensive, I guess like the highest value cards you can currently afford in the best condition. We're also considering like popular species here, so that's another thing to consider. Pokemon like Charizard and Umbreon or Pikachu tend to do better than things like Wigglytuff. So sorry to my Wigglytuff fans, but it's just the truth, right? So you're leveraging the popularity of the character, which is going to convert into consumer demand, and then you're getting the highest rarity and best condition version of those cards that you can find in hopes that you can secure a PSA 10 and sell that card for a premium in that grade. And the difference in like all the value that you have vested in the expenses of that card, so like the cost of the card itself, the cost of acquisition, and then also the shipping expenses to PSA and back if you decide to accept it back from PSA instead of vaulting it. And then additionally, whatever frictional selling platform fees that you might incur later on, you're going to have to calculate all of that. And then you can use that information to see what's an appropriate price for you to be selling so that you make money in the end. Now, the neat thing about completing that cycle is when you sell the card, not only do you get your original capital back, but also you get more money back, that is the net profit. So now you have more money to do the same thing again, over and over again, as many times as possible to grow that bankroll, and then you're in a pretty good position. The neat thing about using a service like PSA in particular is as you start like consistently sending off submissions, you're going to start getting submissions back in a consistent and semi-predictable manner as well. And that positions you to be benefiting from cash flow. And that's kind of like the whole idea here, right? It's like getting as much money back as frequently as possible so that you can continue to do business and continue to generate revenue and margin. So there's that. The next sector that people tend to utilize in order to make money from the hobby is service-based businesses. And I myself recently started a new business called geminspectorllc, which is a pre-grading service. This service leverages my 7 years of experience in this hobby handling pristine and otherwise cards. I have submitted thousands and thousands of cards to companies like CGC and PSA for grading. Now, each of these companies have different grading scales. They all look at the same subcategories like centering, corners, edges, and surface. However, they weight defects in each of those areas a little bit differently. So, since I've optimized the grading scale for so many years, I can now offer my knowledge and insight as a service to other collectors or businesses. That's service, right? Now, the thing here is like there's a little bit greater barrier to entry because as I just described, I'm using like 7 years of knowledge and experience to implement a service-based business. But when you look at another service-based business model like consignment, that can become a little bit more accessible. At a high level, you're going to really reap benefits from having preferential selling fees on platforms like eBay or Fanatics, which takes a lot of time to build up. Like I've been at reselling for quite a while and I've got thousands and thousands of sales on eBay, but that's not nearly enough to actually get preferential fees on that platform. However, if you have a buddy who's also into collecting cards and he's got some extra stuff that he wants to get rid of, but he's not comfortable shipping the items, you can facilitate that via consignment. You could offer to sell his stuff on your store, you handle the listings, you handle the shipping, you handle the customer service, and you just charge a surcharge, whether it be a flat fee or a percentage of net profit or net sale, and you can work that out with your buddies, you know, ideally more than one, and you can run like a little consignment business. And that's like the idea here behind a consignment-based service is you want to create a win-win situation. That's where you're going to elicit the most amount of success is by doing something that causes you benefit and the customer or, you know, other involved person. Like they both have to be winning. Otherwise you have a broken system that's not going to actually pan out for you at any like timeline, like any extensive amount of time. Now, the next thing that I'll offer to you guys, and this is one that I probably least recommend because it's the most restrictive in terms of capital. I would say that the second option that I just got done talking about is the most restrictive in terms of experience or credentials. This one happens to be the most restrictive in terms of capital, and that's investing. Investing is the thing that's probably most appealing to people as they're getting back into this space. However, to actually do it in a meaningful capacity, you need a lot of money to be putting into things. And obviously all of this requires some amount of content knowledge and to varying degrees experience, and you're going to be gaining experience as you do all of these things. So like when it comes to option number one, reselling, it's like You don't have to have that much experience, because every time you like make a mistake, you're going to scrape your knee and learn not to fall again like that. However, for number 3, if you're actually going to be investing, which I should probably define as you're purchasing an item with the intent to hold back or retain for an extended period of time, hoping that the amount of available product of that type dwindles over time, whether it be to attrition or just shifted interest, and then you're leveraging the cyclical nature of the market to come back and be able to sell that at a greater price somewhere down the line. Again, this is most restrictive in terms of capital, because you might think it's a good idea to pick up like a booster box for $200 and then wait 5 years, and heck, you might be able to sell it for $300. The problem with that is going from $200 to $300 minus shipping and fees is actually not that much money, and you just waited 5 years to make $50. That is not a very good deal. That's averaging $10 per year, which if you would have just been deploying that same amount of capital into reselling, you would have been able to turn over your inventory and bankroll so many times that that money would have grown to a much larger amount. So if you're considering investing, there's kind of 2 things to keep in mind. One, you either need to already have a bunch of money, or you need to get some more of it. And you can do that partially by, as I just explained, reselling for a while. And the idea here is that you, and this is something I'm currently doing myself right now. I'm not much of an investor for a couple of reasons, and I won't dive into them too deeply, but I enjoy the activity of reselling more so than anything. But the idea here is if you're reselling to the point where you can no longer turn over your entire bankroll efficiently or consistently, whatever extra money you have left over, you could start deploying that into items to set back, collect dust until they're worth more than they're currently worth down the line. So that could be a valid strategy, and I know a lot of people are intrigued by the idea of investing. It's typically done most broadly with sealed product, though some people like to speculate on individual cards, whether they're raw or graded as well. I won't offer too much of my opinion on that, but regardless, it is a strategy that people utilize and employ to make money in the hobby. So with that said, we have reselling, a service-based business, and investing. As far as I can tell, these are the 3 most broadly used types of revenue-generating practices within this space, and all of them, to some extent, could be accessible to you. Now, the biggest limiting factor, we talked about barriers of entry to each of these 3 things, but I'll just kind of like spill this for anyone who's sticking around at the end. The greatest barrier to entry of any of these 3 practices is going to be your ability to consistently output. That's it. The thing that separates most people from like actually being successful doing a thing versus a failed attempt is consistent effort over time. A lot of people simply lack the discipline to follow through with things. Maybe they're, like I wake up at 5 a.m. every day and package my eBay orders. Well, sometimes people might get sleepy and choose to hit the snooze button and then delay their packaging or shipping for the next day or whatever. And then maybe they don't do their listings that day, and so the algorithm isn't picking up their store, and so they're not making sales, and then their store kind of falls dead and they lose incentive to keep selling things, and they kind of just flake off into the distance. Like what I just described is the most common thing to happen in like literally anything ever, whether it be weightlifting, dieting, selling things, any hobby or activity or work, like anything. People's lack of consistency and discipline is usually the number 1 greatest barrier to entry. So whatever one of these 3 choices or mix and match of you decide to pursue, just be sure that you are going to be consistently intentional in your efforts over an extended period of time. And if you do that, you're going to elicit the greatest amount of reward over the long term. So with that said, I hope this video finds you well. I hope that you are able to use this information to start devising your own plan of action, and stay tuned for the next video where I talk about how you can actually take action in a variety of ways and how you might offset imperfections or unexpected things that pop up while doing so. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.